The sun was a burning orb in the sky, casting its golden light across fields that stretched endlessly, like a patchwork quilt of amber and emerald. My land, my solace. Harvest season had arrived with its familiar symphony, the rhythmic hum of farm machinery, the rustle of wind through crops, and the occasional call of a distant bird. It was a time when the farm breathed in harmony with the world, and I found my peace. But peace is a fragile thing. The Homeowners Association had long been a thorn in my side, a superfluous entity in a world where nature dictated the rules. But Karen, the president with a penchant for pettiness, had taken it upon herself to enforce the bylaws with an iron fist. Her latest decree, like an unexpected frost, came in the form of a tow truck that rumbled onto my land, a mechanical beast with eyes set on my tractor. Harvest season, of all times, it was like trying to bake bread without an oven. The tractor, an old but trusted companion, was as much a part of the farm as the soil itself. Watching it being hauled away felt like losing a limb. Karen stood at the edge of the property, arms crossed, a self-satisfied smirk barely masked by her oversized sunglasses. She was a hawk, circling above, ever watchful for any transgression to pounce upon. In that moment, anger was a fire threatening to consume, but I doused it with a deep breath. The land was patient. It taught me patience. This was but a ripple in the pond of my life here. I returned to the fields, the sun now a softer glow in the late afternoon sky. There was work to be done. With or without the tractor, my hands understood the language of the earth, and together we would find a way. Karen, in her quest for control, had forgotten who truly held the reins. The land lease, a contract with the state, was a card she hadn't realized I could play. Its details, like the roots of the crops, ran deep, unseen by those who did not care to look. I found myself smiling, a subtle curve that echoed the horizon. There was power in knowing the lay of the land, in the quiet understanding that while Karen could toy with my tractor, she could not touch the soil beneath my feet. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with strokes of orange and purple. I thought of the coming days, the harvest, the earth yielding its bounty, and of Karen, who thought she could dictate the rhythm of life here. Beneath the surface, the land held secrets mine to wield, mine to protect. The contract was a seed, waiting to sprout in the fertile ground of opportunity. As the first stars appeared, I knew that this was far from over. It was a beginning, a prelude to a dance where the steps would soon change. Karen had made her move. Now, it was my turn to guide the dance, to gently remind her that, while the HOA might write the rules, I held something far more enduring. The land listened, the soil warm and reassuring under my hands. Yes, there was work to be done, and the earth, ever patient, waited with me. The morning sun stretched lazily over the fields, casting a golden hue on the half-harvested crops. I stood there, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, fingers tracing its worn curves, contemplating the quiet storm brewing under this painted sky. The air smelled of earth and labor, yet an unsettling tension gnawed at the edges of this rural tranquility. Karen was at it again. The HOA's rules, once a vague murmur in the background of community life, had morphed into a blaring siren, orchestrated by her relentless hands. Absurd regulations sprouted like weeds, each more convoluted than the last. The monthly newsletter, now a tome of petty grievances, arrived with the weight of her vendetta. My tractor's absence loomed large, a stark reminder of Karen's latest triumph. Without its steady rumble, the field seemed eerily silent, like a stage awaiting a performance. Irony clung to the air. She had her victory, yet the season's rhythm was disrupted. The harvest waited for no one, not even Karen's meticulous crusade. She was a maestro of suburban warfare, conducting her ensemble of grievances with precision, lawn lengths, trash can colors, and garden gnome placements, each a note in her symphony of order. But it was the tractor that had become her crescendo, a violation, she'd said, of aesthetic norms, as if the earth cared for such pretensions. Rumors fluttered like restless birds, whispering through the neighborhood. Karen had become a figure of both ridicule and fear. Her influence extended beyond the HOA meetings, weaving into casual conversations at the local diner, where eyes darted and voices dropped to a conspiratorial hush. But I had my own notes to play. The state land lease was my quiet card, a trump hidden in the folds of bureaucracy. Karen didn't realize how finely tuned the balance was between land and law, nor did she care. Her vision was narrow, focused solely on her immediate kingdom. Yet, I understood the wider landscape, where her reach could falter. Every citation she issued, every whisper she spread, built towards an inevitable confrontation. My resolve was a slowly tightening coil. Waiting for the right moment to unfurl, I watched as her self-imposed empire swelled, knowing that empires fall not by force, but by the weight of their own ambition. The community potluck was approaching, a gathering Karen relished for its potential to showcase her authority. I imagined her, surveying her domain, satisfied with her machinations. The irony, of course, would come when she discovered the limitations of her reign. I'd let her revel in her moment, for the fall would be more profound. The tractor would return, not as a defiance of her rules, but as a symbol of resilience. The harvest would continue, as it always had, nurtured by the hands that understood the land's true rhythms. Karen's rules were but fleeting shadows on this enduring landscape. I finished my coffee, the last drops cold and bitter. The sun had climbed higher. Burning away the morning mist, I turned toward the fields, where labor awaited a reminder that while Karen waged her wars, the earth continued its ancient cycle, indifferent to the whims of human folly. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, that peculiar blend of decay and renewal. Leaves scuttled about on the wind like whispers of past grievances, and around me, the fields stretched wide and golden, waiting for the dance of machinery to bring forth their bounty. Yet, here I stood, tractorless, thanks to the machinations of Karen, the self-appointed arbiter of the homeowners association. In the days following the tow, I watched her with quiet curiosity. Her clipped heels echoed dominion over the neighborhood, a queen surveying her subjects. Her smile was always tight, never reaching her eyes, and her gaze held the sheen of someone who believed herself invincible. She was a force, a small storm in a teacup, and in her mind, the HOA was her court. I took to documenting her every move, not with the intent of confrontation but as insurance. I noted when she picked up her mail, the times she walked her dog, and how she made a point to greet every resident with saccharine politeness. Details were my solace, the minutiae grounding me amidst my simmering frustration. Rumor had it she was planning another vote, an attempt to impose further restrictions on our little patch of earth, petty regulations that would sprout like weeds, choking the life out of the simple joys of rural living. And so, I prepared my counter, a subtle coup. The land lease was my secret ace, held close to my chest, a binding contract with the state that allotted me substantial control over the swath of land Karen coveted for her proposed park expansion. Funny how the land she deemed unsuitable for my tractor was suddenly the perfect canvas for her gentrified dreams. I drafted a proposal, precise and unyielding, to renew the lease and expand my farming operations. Legalese entwined with firm intentions. I envisioned her face when she discovered her pristine park was no more than a fantasy. She would bristle. I knew, but the state officials were pragmatic folks, more interested in revenue and sustainable use than her visions of pastoral perfection. At the next HOA meeting, I slipped the proposal into the conversation. A stone cast into still waters. The ripple was imperceptible at first, But within moments, the room buzzed with murmurs. Karen's gaze turned to me, sharp and assessing. Her mask slipped, just a fraction, revealing the crack in her armor. For the first time, silence held the room. I could see her calculating, weighing her options, the realization settling in that she had underestimated the quiet farmer on the outskirts, her rein held by the fragile thread of perception. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. There was no victory in this, just the satisfaction of balance restored. The scales tipped back from her overreach. The power she wielded, once absolute, now felt like smoke in the air, tangible for a moment, then gone. As the meeting adjourned, I walked out into the evening, the sky a canvas of twilight hues. The wind whispered through the fields, a soft symphony of resilience. Tomorrow, I mused, the harvest would begin anew, tractor or no. And somewhere in the distance, the comforting hum of change began. The air was heavy with the scent of ripe corn and resentment. Late afternoon sun spilled over the fields in golden waves, sneaking through the tree line like it was trying to keep a secret. I stood at the edge of my property, hands tucked into my pockets, watching the distant figures of HOA board members scuttle about like frantic ants. The scene would have been almost pastoral if not for the tractor-sized hole in my harvest operations. The memory of that morning still simmered beneath my calm exterior, a simmering pot, just shy of boiling over. The sight of an empty barn, usually a bustling hive of pre-harvest activity, was jarring. My tractor, the trusty workhorse, had been towed away under the pretense of some obscure bylaw violation, concocted by Karen and her cronies, a spiteful maneuver that reeked of their desperation to exert control, a futile attempt to rein in my independence. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. Control was an illusion, and I was patient. A breeze whispered through the cornfields, carrying with it the rustle of dry leaves and the barely perceptible hum of a plan set into motion. The land, sprawling and stately, was a patchwork of potential, waiting for the dance of the harvest. It rested in a state-held lease, a fact that seemed to slip through the fingers of those too busy clutching at power. This land was mine to till, theirs to envy, but the truth was, it was the state that held the reins, not the HOA, and I had spent the better part of the previous evening meticulously penning a letter, a quiet missive to the overseers of state land leases. It was a masterpiece of calm precision, describing in understated detail the recent infractions against the lease terms by the HOA's interference. Legalese was a language I spoke fluently. It was like poetry in its structure, each clause a verse, each subclause a rhythmic beat. The pen had danced across the page, sketching out a narrative of rights infringed and duties overstepped, a quiet rebellion, inked in black and white. Even now, as evening shadows stretched lazily across the land, I imagined the envelope on its journey, a silent herald of change. The state auditors would soon descend, their arrival heralded by the rustle of papers and the cold click of pens. They would not come for me. I was the compliant tenant. They would come for the chaos makers. The corner of my mouth twitched at the thought. Karen, with her rigid hairdo as unbending as her rules, would be left grasping at straws, her authority crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide of bureaucracy. The sound of distant car engines brought me back. The board meeting was dispersing, the ants retreating to their polished hills, oblivious to the approaching storm. I turned away from the spectacle, back towards the heart of the land that had been my solace. With the tractor gone, my hands itched for the soil, but this time they would find satisfaction in a different kind of harvest. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, and the fields whispered a promise of justice carried by the wind. Patience, like revenge, was best served cold, and mine had been chilling for far too long. Amidst the morning mist, the air hung heavy with the scent of fresh earth and the faint sound of distant machinery. I stood at the edge of the fields, a silent sentinel watching over rows of crops that stretched towards the horizon. The absence of my tractor left a gaping wound in the landscape. But the rhythm of the harvest was relentless, immune to the whims of petty bureaucracy. The HOA's decision to tow my tractor echoed with the sharp caw of crows circling overhead. Karen, with her perfectly manicured disdain, had made it her mission to enforce her brand of order upon our community. Her move was both calculated and reckless, a power play executed with a smug smile and a clipboard. The irony was palpable. A harvest disrupted by someone who had never dirtied her hands with soil. Yet, beneath her veneer of control, there lay an undercurrent of fragility, one that she would soon discover as the unyielding tide of consequences rose to meet her. My connection to the state land lease was not just a line on paper. It was the backbone of our community, a foundation built on generations of hard labor and resilience. She had underestimated the strength of that bond. The fields were not silent for long. Neighbors began to trickle in, a quiet procession of solidarity. They came with hoes and rakes, their faces set with determination. Without a word, they began to work, filling the void left by machinery with the hum of human effort. Their presence was a testament to a shared history, an unspoken vow to stand shoulder to shoulder against the storm Karen had unwittingly unleashed. As the sun climbed higher, my thoughts turned inward. There was a certain satisfaction in watching the unfolding tableau, a gentle reminder that power did not always rest in the hands of those who sought to wield it most forcefully. Karen might have had her clipboard, but I had the land and all the unyielding spirit that came with it. It was not long before whispers reached her ears, whispers of fields still thriving, of a community unbowed by her machinations. In the HOA office, her fortress of rules and regulations, she sat with furrowed brow, the weight of her choices pressing down like a plowshare. The irony was delicious. Her actions had sown seeds of rebellion she could not control. I imagined her there, clutching her pen with white-knuckled desperation, trying to rewrite a narrative that was slipping through her fingers, her world of order crumbling beneath the quiet determination of people she had dismissed as mere farmers. When the call finally came from the state office, it was a mere formality. The lease was safe, the land firmly in my hands. Karen's influence shrank to a mere footnote, a fading echo in the annals of our community's history. She would remain, a figurehead stripped of power, a reminder of the folly of underestimating those bound by shared purpose. As the last rays of sun bathed the fields in golden light, I found myself smiling. The day had unfolded not as a victory won through aggression, but as a testament to resilience. The community was restored, its heart beating strong beneath the weight of unyielding determination. Karen might have set the stage, but it was the land and its people who wrote the final act.